I loved the reading, which is from a different translation I've just started to use that is more dialogical. And I appreciate Joan reading that with you this morning. It's a story that you may have heard before, the feeding of the 5,000. Just to tell you about the size of Joan's faith, she said she very seriously considered bringing a single bun and a can of tuna and having Bruce and Larry put a sign out in the front saying, barbecue, and just see how it went. Have I got that about right? And that's a perfect illustration of what happened in the Bible story, because it says the people were stirred in conversation. I wonder what they actually said. I wonder if they thought somebody else must have had food. Because if you notice how it starts with, if I did this, I'd only have a little tiny bit of food. Well, I could work for half a year and I'd only have this much food. Well, I've now come up to 5 loaves of barley and a fish. So they were stirred in conversation. I think we're still stirred in conversation reading those stories and talking about world hunger, because we are still stirred to ask, what could we do? Just like the disciples, how could we feed all these people? We don't have enough money to feed the growing number of hungry people, not us ourselves. Even if I asked you to give me all of your RRSPs, sell all of our houses, we aren't enough. One of the great gifts of this story is that the fact we can't do it all doesn't stop Jesus from saying, well, let's start. Let's see what we've got. And then, of course, Andrew's famous sentence, well, I met a guy who's got a fish and a couple of loaves of bread. When we start saying what's possible, we invite responses. We say, well, what can we do? Having heard people tell us we can't do everything, and Jesus heard that, we hear that, we probably concur, then we think, well, what have we got? What are our resources? I think we have several. One of our very first resources is the truth, the facts, the numbers that are increasing, honest recognition of the hurdles, so that we're not so spiritual about things that we become no earthly good, as the old phrase goes. The Ukrainian war has made food much scarcer. 2 countries involved in grain production, Russia and Ukraine, are out of the grain transfer around the world. Increased costs everywhere have made it more difficult. I think if we had a whiteboard, I think we could probably just put all our answers down and we'd have a whiteboard filled in 3 minutes. I wonder if, in fact, that's not similar to the feeling the disciples had. We acknowledge we want to help, we want to feed, and we don't know where we'd find the resources. One of the places we find resources is, just as they did, common action. And that's why World Food Day is from the United Nations. And it's an odd thing, but they're working away now, decade after decade, trying to help us understand and get our governments to respond and deliver food. And it can be a bag of grain and some oil given to a family anywhere around the world for a week. It's not enough, but it's more than they had. The Food and Agriculture Organization. So leaving no one behind means for us, when it comes to these projects, working on many fronts at the same time, so we have to work together. This last year, the Church of Latter-day of Jesus Saint, no, I've got that wrong, I'm sorry, the Mormons, thank you, gave $30 million to this program, FAO, Leave No One Behind. The first time they've ever done that. Everyone was shocked. They didn't see it coming. That was like Andrew saying, I've met someone who has a fish, isn't it? So here we are, given the opportunity to find out what are the fish that we've got around. I don't have to tell you that through the United Church, we've come to recognize that hunger is at a new high, and our responses are through 3 different ways. The biggest response we give is through the Mission and Service Fund. And we just got our booklet this last week of Christmas presents from around the world called Gifts with Vision. We have some copies in the office. This is one of the ways that all the churches act together. We don't always send food. Sometimes we send a call, people who know how to help them from the agriculture word. But these are one of the ways we give is through the organization our church belongs to internationally. The best way we can invest our money with high accountability and goals. Another way we do it is through our local charities and justice organizations. Our Place, the food banks we support. Here in our neighborhood, the North Park Hamper. We talked about that last week. 90 families. So those are two different groups that we're reaching out to. And the final way we do it doesn't cost anything and doesn't involve money. And that's where I think it becomes our gift of time. You may not be able to afford anything, but you might have the time to phone Our Place and say, thank you for what you're doing. You may not have the money to give a dime extra to the Mission and Service Fund, but you might have the time to send an email or a letter to our federal government saying, you support overseas aid. It doesn't always have to be that we give money. Once we believe in a project, we find other ways to say, here are my fish, here are my loaves. Here it is. I can phone my member of parliament. You know, if you're talking to your member of parliament, the letter's free. It's just your time. So we have ways we can give internationally. We have ways we can give locally and provincially. And we have ways we can give that don't involve money. These are all different kinds of loaves and fishes, if you will. When we talk to children, we know that they wonder what it feels like to be that hungry all the time. We don't have answers, but we can say that's what the original people who heard this story were wondering too. They stirred in conversation. I wonder what it's like. I wonder how we can help. We have so many things going on, but Leave No One Behind asks of us, through the Canadian Food Grains Bank, our old ally in this work, to work at different levels, whichever place you have that you can put your loaf and your fish and say, here is my involvement because I don't want anyone left behind. Like the original disciples, we may feel, I can't write a check the size of the Mormons, but I can write letters. I can give support. I can say thank you and what I desire to overcome the hurdles. That's what we can do, help you overcome the hurdles. And to keep on telling the government, we want no one left behind. We want to work together so that we don't have to wonder anymore. What is it like to be one of those billions of people going to bed hungry tonight? May God bless to us our sharing, our loaves, our fishes in different places. Amen.